Good evening, everyone, and welcome to University Hospital's Cures and Hope. I'm Monica Robbins, Senior Health Correspondent for WKYC-TV, and I will be your host for tonight's live stream event. Normally, you'd all be gathered in Florida, but we're delighted to have you with us virtually. And on behalf of UH, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. I'd also like to thank Key Private Bank's Family Wealth Group for their support as our presenting sponsor. And a special thank you to all the UH frontline caregivers, research scientists, and staff members behind the scenes who have worked so diligently during the past year to make sure that we're all safe and healthy. Tonight, you will learn UH's global collaboration with the University of Oxford and the critical role research and drug development play in public health. A new year is always full of optimism and renewal, and boy, did we need a switch after last year. 2021 not only brought us vaccines and hope, it's also the year that UH welcomed its new CEO, Dr. Cliff Megerian. Although I can tell you, he spent last year earning his proverbial CEO wings with all that he had to deal with during the pandemic, that's for sure. Of course, he is no stranger to UH or Cleveland. He did his residency at UH in the late 80s, spent some time in Boston, then returned with his family to continue an amazing career as a surgeon. He's held several leadership roles in the last 18 years, most recently as president of University Hospitals. He is a pioneer in the use of cochlear implants in children and is recognized as an international authority in ear surgery. He chaired the Department of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery, as well as the director of the UH Ear, Nose, and Throat Institute. And he was the inaugural holder of the Richard and Patricia Pogue Endowed Chair in Auditory Surgery and Hearing Sciences. It is my honor to turn over the program to University Hospital CEO, Dr. Cliff Megerian.
Thank you, Monica, for that fantastic introduction, and good evening, everybody. As Monica said, I am Cliff Megerian, Dr. Cliff Megerian, CEO of University Hospitals, and it is my real pleasure to welcome you to what I believe to be an uplifting and illuminating discussion. Tonight, we are excited to share information about UH Cures, powered by the Harrington Discovery Institute. HDI, as it is referred, is part of the Harrington Project for Discovery and Development, a one-of-a-kind endeavor launched by UH in 2012 with the generous support of Ron and Nancy Harrington and their family, Jill Harrington, Ron and Lydia Harrington. Their vision is now a global network of the top physician scientists from academic institutions across North America and in the United Kingdom. HDI translates scientific discoveries into new medicines to benefit society. UH experts in science, medicine, and drug development now work tirelessly to bring scientific discoveries from the lab to the patients who benefit the most. To the Harrington family, we are forever grateful for your vision and commitment to finding cures for the incurable. For more than 155 years, UH has focused on tonight's topic, cures and hope. These two words serve as the driving factor behind our enduring mission, which you all know, to heal, to teach, and to discover. And while the past year has presented daunting challenges that at times left us anxious for a cure, but short on hope, we begin 2021 on a much brighter note. With the vaccination rate increasing daily, we move closer and closer to returning to our pre-COVID lives. And so we are pleased to share with you a look into the future, one supported by science, driven by dedicated UH medical experts, and made possible by all of you who will take the lead in events like this to help us learn about more advances in healthcare and generously invest in advancing the science of health and the art of compassion. We would like to acknowledge the generous support of our presenting sponsor, Key Private Bank Family Wealth. We are the most appreciative of their ongoing work and trust in our work as well. Key Bank has long been intertwined with the history of University Hospitals. Actually, leaders from Key and its predecessor organizations have served as board directors and trustees of UH as far back as the mid-1800s. Today, many of Key's fine people serve on UH boards, committees, and councils. Many of their employees volunteer across our system, including my friend Chris Gorman, the chairman and chief executive officer and president of Key Corp, who is a valued member of the UH board. Our organizations share a commitment to people, our employees, customers, patients, business owners, friends, and supporters, and we cannot be prouder of our long partnership. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Cliff, and congratulations on your new position, because I know as a Clevelander and everyone else here who has anything to do with university hospitals, we look forward to your tenure in this new decade and really look forward to any advancements in healthcare that you're going to usher in for us.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce Christopher Gorman, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Key Corp. But before I do that, I should mention that Key Private Bank is a $15 billion business that happens to have offices in both Palm Beach and Naples. And congratulations are in order, as Key Private Bank was just named Best Family Office in North America by Private Asset Management. I understand this is kind of like the Oscars for wealth management. So congratulations, and please welcome Chris Gorman.
Thank you, Monica. Good evening. It is an honor to welcome you to University Hospital's 2021 Cures and Hope event. As an anchor in our communities, UH has been a leader in the response to COVID-19. On behalf of all of us at Key, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to all caregivers, especially those on the front line, in leading our battle against COVID with bravery, resilience, and grace. You are helping secure a better, brighter future for all of us. Together, Key Bank and University Hospitals share a commitment to the well-being of our neighbors and neighborhoods we so proudly serve. Key Bank is pleased to partner with UH not only on tonight's event, but many initiatives across our community. Together, we provide access to educational opportunities, and we support services to patients and their families. Most recently, we were pleased to help underwrite the mobile COVID testing unit that UH is using throughout Northeast Ohio, which ensures testing in underserved communities. I am also very proud to serve on UH's board of directors. On behalf of the board, I'd like to offer a very warm welcome, a Florida warm welcome, to Dr. Cliff Megerian for his first official Florida outreach event. And on behalf of Key Bank, thank you for all of your support of university hospitals. And please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Society was closing down. People were sick and dying. We had absolutely no medicines. We're sort of reminded, right, the hospital was a place to go when you were sick, but what could we do? So this is really the calling of the Harrington Discovery Institute, the responsibility and charge. After we got the backing, we went about reallocating resources and raising money to be sure that we were ready to make a difference. We know today that a first-generation vaccine will not solve the problem. Not enough people will take it, and the virus will mutate too quickly because of distribution, okay? So we are going to be needing more. And the solution is antivirals that we are experts in making. New ideas that will prevent transmission, prevent infection.
I read a paper by Marcus Hoffman and colleagues in the journal Cell. It was a preprint, March of 2020, that based upon previous data indicated that a compound called chemostat was effective in blocking SARS-CoV-2 viral entry of cells in vitro. And so the question was, could chemostat be used as a drug? In other words, as a repurposed drug? Would chemostat help people either prevent them from getting infected or to treat them? And not only that, chemostat's an oral drug. It's a small molecule, it's a pill. And the Harrington Discovery Institute helped in a number of ways. Financially, it's always good to have money, but the real joy of working with the Harrington Discovery Institute was that they enabled me to be credible in the COVID-19 space. More recently, we've made a lot of additional advances because the Harrington Discovery Institute also provides this extremely deep bench for drug discovery and drug development.
The urgency around COVID was a reminder for us of what it is that we do. We put out international call for applications. We brought in 50 that we thought could change the world. We had enough money to fund 12, and we've been moving those 12 forward really quite successfully. We have a beautiful set of discoveries.
Matteo Parotto and I had been focusing on developing a platform for preventing viral entry that could really be applied broadly. Something that makes our antiviral strategy really different from others that you may have heard about is that our antiviral directly attacks the virus at its earliest step of getting into the person to start infection. We're directly stopping the virus. We think that our peptide antiviral is not going to have any side effects. It's not going to have any dangers. It's going to simply prevent the virus from ever getting in and ever causing any effects. You could get on a plane, you could go to a sporting event, you could go to a party, you could be protected with a once-a-day nasal spray. We are extremely excited about this, and we just are sort of really chomping at the bit to get this into people and move this forward. And this is where Harrington Discovery Institute and the Harrington Scholar Award came in as an essential piece of this, because what that does is it guides us from the science and the experiments that show that this works in animals, for example, to prevent transmission. The Harrington team that we have guides us into how we then take that into developing a drug that we could get out into human beings.
What we're focused on is developing a convenient single-dose treatment or preventative or just-in-time universal vaccine against COVID, all strains that arise. And rather than target some of the classic things that people have focused on for viruses, we sought to target the structure of the viral genome. Prior to COVID, I would say our research was focused on developing new types of antiviral drugs, also anti-cancer drugs. And so we actually were in a really good position to pivot when it became clear that COVID is something we need to address. And indeed, we were able to do this very quickly. And thanks to the support of the Harrington Discovery Institute, not only is there financial resources, but there's a great team that comes with it. And so it's really great working with them. It's not only exciting, but it's an honor and a privilege. I mean, this is how everyone in my lab, how we can contribute and how we can give back to society and put our training and experience to work against this really national emergency. And it's what we've been trained for, it's what we do.
Our job is really to help the world live with this virus, right, in all of its forms, and with all of the challenges that it will pose for us. We're giving you the total complement of armamentarium that medicine needs to keep us healthy and to allow us to enjoy life to the fullest.
I have to tell you, I've had the privilege of covering HDI since its inception, and it is such an incredible joy to bring stories to you about the amazing things that they are doing, and not to mention that every dollar that goes into that institution is actually not only changing lives, but literally saving lives. Now, during this pandemic, Dr. Dan Simon, University Hospital's Chief Clinical and Scientific Officer, President, UH Cleveland Medical Center, and the Ernie and Patti Novak Distinguished Chair in Healthcare Leadership, was tasked to co-lead UH's COVID-19 preparedness, response, and recovery effort. He has graced many a television station and computer screen, providing critical insight and information. Dr. Simon.
Thank you, Monica. While we live in the most exciting times in medicine, when all seems possible, we focus today on the great unmet needs of our time, exemplified by COVID, and the spotlight it has placed on the key role of academic institutions in society as research and discovery engines. And I have the pleasure of introducing someone whose track record in the arena is unmatched. Professor Sir John Bell holds the Regius Chair of Medicine at Oxford, one of the oldest in academia, established in 1546 by King Henry VIII of England. Originally from Canada, Sir John did his medical training on a Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford, completed his postgraduate training at Stanford in genetics, and returned to Oxford in 1987. Over the years, he has held a number of leadership positions at Oxford in academia and in government service, which have helped shape innovations in the UK and internationally. Leading the UK's government's life sciences strategy since 2011, and most recently serving as a member of the UK Vaccine Task Force to facilitate introduction and distribution of a COVID vaccine in the UK and globally. Also, Sir John sits on the boards of Roche and Genentech, and among his charity positions, he serves as a trustee of the Rhodes Trust and chairs the Scientific Advisory Board of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And last but not least, he serves on the Oversight Committee for the Oxford Harrington Rare Disease Center, which he established with Dr. Jonathan Stamler to be a leading force in curing rare disease. Tonight, we are discussing cures and hope. The pandemic has created challenges worldwide with millions affected. Travel between the UK and the US is shut down. New strains are emerging. Oxford has played an important role in the race to return society to normal. Sir John, how do you think we are doing?
I think my view is that we're not doing too badly now. I think we can see a way out of the problem. This is a pretty clever little virus, though, and it keeps throwing stuff at us. So I think we're in a relatively unpredictable stage in that we're seeing a few new variants. I think they'll be manageable. We may get more variants. I think we can deal with those, but we mustn't let our guard down now, because I think we've still got a few months to go before we properly get on top of it. But my prediction would be by the summer in the developed world, things will look a lot better. I think we've got some way to go in the developing world before we get on top of this disease. And I think we have to get used to the fact that the world will have to live with this new form of coronavirus probably forever, because it's quite unlikely we'll eliminate it from the system.
In the US, I think we feel we're coming off the third surge. Governors are relaxing perhaps a little bit too fast. People really want to get back to normal. What's the mood like in the UK?
You know, this has been going on a long time, and people are really pretty tired. They're fed up. They want to try and get things back to normal. And I think there is a risk that we'll take our foot off the brake far too quickly. Having said that, I think one of the keys to getting out of this problem is going to be widespread vaccination. I think that, along with the real world data that shows how effective these vaccines are in populations, gives you a lot of hope that we'll get on top of this over the next few months as we start to vaccinate out the whole population.
That's terrific. So, you know, Sir John, you've played an incredible role in leading and overseeing the AstraZeneca vaccine development through your partnership with Oxford. You know, can you tell us a little bit about what that was really like? And Oxford, you know, we have learned, insisted on delivering the vaccine globally. You know, why was that so central to your mission?
So, like all these things, a lot of these things have their roots that go back a very long way. And it was in the mid-1970s that Oxford made a substantial commitment to understanding the causes of premature death globally, with a major focus on emerging and severe infections in the developing world. The Jenner Institute, which was set up by Adrian Hill about 20 years ago, made a real focus of thinking about vaccines for the diseases that the commercial companies would never be interested in. Dengue, malaria, Nipah virus, coronaviruses, MERS, and the likes. These are not diseases that the standard commercial companies that rely on their P&Ls would ever approach. So that program has been chipping away at that problem for a long time. They've established a whole set of infrastructure, clinical biomanufacturing capabilities to be able to make virus for clinical trials. We've identified a whole set of prime boost strategies, including identifying the ChAdOx vector, which we're using for this vaccine, which is a chimp adenovector. Took Adrian and the team a long time to work out how to get that and how to use it. So there's a fantastic background to the story. And Sarah Gilbert, who's leading the discovery bit of the project, had been working on MERS, which is the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus, which is another SARS coronavirus. And she had been busy building a vaccine in ChAdOx with that virus, undertaking immunogenicity studies, getting ready for a clinical trial. She had really good immunogenicity. The thing looked pretty good. They were using the spike protein from MERS. And that was all really leading up to November of last year, 2019, basically. And so when the news came out, and there's another very important bit of this, and that is Oxford has this amazing global network. And we've actively pursued a global network. The UK, unlike the US, is a very small country. So if you don't do stuff globally, you're kind of boxed in a corner. So about the middle or the end of December, George Gao, who runs the CDC in China, who's an old student of mine, called up and said, "We got a problem in China." I thought, oh my God, this does not look good. And it taken him some time to find out exactly what was going on in China, but it was clear they had a major pneumonic illness. And it was his lab that sequenced the virus in the first instance. So as soon as he finished that sequence, which was on the 8th of January, Sarah moved across from MERS to start to try and develop a vaccine in this space. And because Adrian Hill and the others had built this fantastic infrastructure, she was able to go from the initial sequence of the new virus all the way through all the preclinical work, animal models, immunogenicity studies in animal models, primate studies, the lot in 100 days. Well, I mean, that is just amazing. And
that's incredible.
And I think what's very gratifying to me is that the pace at which we went at it had made everybody else change their mind about the pace that they were going to have to go if they were going to compete. And I remember Tony Fauci, who's a terrific guy and an old friend, did say in February, we won't have any vaccines until the end of 2021 or early 2022. And I kept thinking, Tony, you've got that completely wrong. There's a chance we'll get some very much sooner. And of course, the RNA vaccines then kicked into action. So that was really the beginning of the journey. About the end of March or beginning of April, it became very clear to me that we as a university had a whole set of issues if we were going to try and get a vaccine to the public. And that is, there are a lot of things that universities simply don't do. They don't do scale up, they don't do regulatory, they don't do commercialization, they don't do distribution. And we had to find a partner who could do that with us. So we set about looking for a pharmaceutical partner that could do it. I led the discussions with a number of them. We ended up with AstraZeneca. And one of the reasons that we went with AstraZeneca was because they were prepared to commit to running a program that was not for profit. In other words, it would be the cost plus 20%, which is widely viewed as the kind of number for not-for-profit, covers your overheads and the likes. And certainly for the first year of the pandemic, until things started to calm down, they were quite prepared to live with that. And they were also quite prepared to live for a not-for-profit scheme for the future, entirely for the future. So for undeveloped LMIC countries, they were prepared to deal with providing this vaccine forever at a not-for-profit basis. So that was an important criteria for us because we were interested in what you could do for the world. And they also agreed that they would really lean into making vaccine manufactured and available to the whole world, not just available for Europe, the US, and very developed countries, but make it available to everybody. And I have to say, they've been absolutely terrific at that. And they've got 13 sites, all of whom are manufacturing. Up to now, they've made more than 400 million doses of the drug. Many of those have got through to be drug product. They're being distributed around 50 countries where it's been approved. I mean, it is the only vaccine at the moment for the world outside the highly developed world. And that was Oxford's ambition. You know, in the end, people in developed countries are going to be fine because they can get vaccine. We needed a vaccine that people in the developing world were going to get. And that was the ambition. So the rest of the story, I think you probably know, we ran through the trials pretty quickly. To their credit, Pfizer got a result out before we did by about a month with a very interesting messenger RNA construct. But a month later, our trial reported, and we've been busy working on those initial data ever since. And we think we've now got a vaccine which is really efficacious, highly effective in all age groups. And if you leave 12 weeks between the first and the second dose, it's got an efficacy in the low 80%, 83, 84%. So it looks very much like the other really good vaccines in the space. Anyway, it's been a saga. I could talk all night about that, but I won't.
Well, Sir John, it's so inspiring to hear you talk about it. I can't imagine the stress and the pressure that your team was under because you were working at a pace that we had never seen before. Let's shift gears for a moment, if we can, and talk about the Harrington Discovery Institute model at UH and hear from you, Sir John. Many would be surprised to know that you and Dr. Stamler began working over 7 years ago together on really the unique capabilities of the Harrington Discovery Institute in identifying best-in-class discovery and developing new drugs. The HDI finds the most promising science in the UK and the US in areas of unmet need, and in the case of COVID, has one of the largest portfolios of new medicines in the world, with over 4 now in very early stage clinical trial. You're responsible for innovation in the UK. Can we hear from you, Sir John? What drove you 7 years ago to start a relationship with the Harrington Discovery Institute?
Yeah, so I'm always attracted at new orthogonal ways of tackling problems. And when I first met Jonathan with an old friend now, the late David U. Pritchard, we had a really terrific discussion about how the Harrington Institute was thinking about this scholars program and thinking about enabling people to move assets further along the value chain towards benefit to patients. And it's something I've done quite a lot with the industry over many years, both biotech and pharma. And it's one of the things that I've always found frustrating, and that is there's a world in which academics live, but in order to move their assets further down the pipeline, they do need help. So things like CMC, how do you make a safe product to test in humans? How do you do those early clinical development projects? How do you think about the best way of dosing drugs? These are things that academics on the whole have never really had any experience with. So what was so brilliant about the Harrington project was that they were bringing people who'd had a lot of experience in industry together with the brightest young minds in academia and providing the kind of mentorship that would allow them to advance really interesting products through the system. And that was something that really attracted me because we hadn't had anything quite like that in the UK. What had happened was people got to a certain point, they'd found an interesting target, they'd maybe even done some early preclinical work, it was all very interesting. They'd then write the Nature paper, and then they'd say, well, if I don't want to set up a biotech company, there's nothing else I can do. I'm going to go back and do something else. And the great thing about the Harrington project is it does allow academics to continue to pursue that activity in their academic post, to take it much further along the line, and also makes it much more tractable for ultimately finding partners who can do the kind of things that we've done with the vaccine here for COVID. So I'm really very, very positive about the way Harrington's approached the project. And I think the success, every year when I look at the list of projects that are supported by Harrington, it's a very impressive list, and one that just absolutely shimmers with innovation. It's a really, really exciting project and continues to get better over time. So that's really why I thought that we should join up with the Harrington team with our Oxford program, because we've got a huge amount of activity that could beautifully fit in that model. But to be clear, we didn't have that model until Harrington came along. It's very much Harrington's invention, and it's a great one.
So since its inception in 2012, the Harrington Discovery Institute has been a nimble and a trailblazer in translating research into medicines for patients. In the spring of 2020, the strong infrastructure of the HDI and agility allowed us really to pivot and to try to face COVID head on. HDI's COVID-19 response has really focused on antiviral therapeutics, preventive medicines to treat first responders, and, for example, allow participation in sports and entertainment, really to normalize society, as well as new drugs for critically ill patients. The Harrington Discovery Institute has about 300 discoveries from 100 plus institutions across the US, UK, and Canada, and has several medicines in clinical trials, and many breakthroughs like a spray that confers COVID-19 protection for 24 hours, which was cited in the New York Times, and a COVID-19 vaccine alternative that produces antibodies in the nose and mouth. So Oxford has focused on a vaccine. Why are both vaccines and antivirals so important?
So vaccines were the way that we chose to pursue the disease, partly because we had a lot of expertise in vaccines. And we also felt that we could get a vaccine, if it was going to work, we could get it to work by the end of 2020. And there are viral infections for which vaccines do not work, largely because they have sufficient evolutionary capacity to evolve quickly away from the immune response that you get to an antigen. And as a result, the idea of having an array, not just one, but probably half a dozen antivirals, is a really important thing for us all to concentrate on. But there is a world still where the virus will mutate to avoid immune responses and becomes resistant to the effective vaccines. And if that's the case, and we don't have antivirals, we're going to be in big trouble. So I've been pushing it very hard here, and I'm glad you've had so much success through the Harrington, because it's going to be essential.
Sir John, we are all looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. Are there aspects you have found hopeful or give you reason to believe that we can beat this for the rest of the world?
Yeah, so I think one of the most interesting things about the vaccines, and this applies to all the vaccines, is that in a very curious way, that the toughest type of this disease to deal with is the mild disease. For severe disease that takes you to hospital, all the vaccines work incredibly well. We're now getting really good real world data from the UK, as you know, because we've immunized all these people. And the real world data looks better day by day. We're protecting very, very large percentages of people, even in the elderly age groups, which are the most difficult in theory to treat. We're getting upwards of 85 or 9% protection in real world data. And that means millions of people who've been exposed to the vaccine. So the data is really robust. And I think that encourages me that we're headed for a world where the presence of severe illness due to COVID-19 will be a thing of the past. Now, there are, of course, a couple of issues that we have to be sure don't catch us. One is if we get a bad variant that means that doesn't work, then we'll be in trouble. I think that's unlikely, though, because the vaccines seem to work, at least on that form of the disease, pretty well. So I think that's probably the single issue that's the most important. Of course, the other issue is that if people don't take the vaccines, they won't be protected from the virus, and people need to understand that is an issue and that leaves people exposed to severe illness. But we're headed for a world that looks a bit like flu. So every so often you may get a bit of a fever and a headache and a sore throat, but you won't end up being admitted to hospital. You'll feel lousy, you'll have aches and pains. But that may well be how we live with COVID-19 for a very long time. And provided not a lot of people get very sick and the hospitals are not overrun and we get better at managing people in hospitals, then I think that's something we can all live with. And that should take us back to pretty normal living, I think, in the relatively short time frame. So that's the good news. And I think we should rejoice that we've got there so quickly.
Professor Sir John Bell, thank you so much for this interview. We appreciate your time. And most of all, it's truly an honor and a privilege to sit with you this evening and discuss with someone who's been really at the forefront of bringing us to the end of the pandemic. We'd like to thank you, and we would like to thank our supporters and partners, Oxford and University Hospitals, with a special shout out to Doctors Matthew Wood, Mukesh Jain, and Jonathan Stamler. To our foundation partners, the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation, the Foundation for Fighting Blindness, and Takeda. And to our new partners, Morgan Stanley Gift and Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, as well as Advent Life Sciences, for now creating new models for the commercialization of drug discovery. And finally, I'd like to thank our friends and supporters, and especially the Harrington family. Thank you, Professor Sir John Bell. We look forward to sitting down with you again in the near future.
Wow, thank you so much, Sir John Bell. What an incredible interview. And I think people need to understand, when the medical textbooks are written 25 years from now about how we dealt with the pandemic, the name of him, Sir John Bell, and his team will be included in those textbooks. Dr. Simon, I have to ask you, I know UH is involved in over 200 clinical trials right now involving COVID alone, but talk to us a little more about the UH Harrington Discovery Institute's role in research relating to those antivirals with Oxford.
Well, you know, Monica, I think what we've heard tonight is that vaccines are great, but they're only addressing part of the problem. If you look at flu, we need a Tamiflu equivalent. We need a pill that you can take if you're exposed to the virus or to prevent you from being infected with the virus. And I think the Harrington Discovery Institute is addressing an unmet clinical need. It said, look, people are working on vaccines. We need to work on antivirals. A national competition all across the US, Canada, and into the UK, 300 applications. 50 finalists, 12 were funded, and you've heard now 4 are in clinical trials. These include oral pills, new vaccines, intranasal spray therapies that will protect us for 24 hours, allowing us to go to opening day for the Cleveland Indians. So I'm really excited. I think these have a really good chance of making their way through phase 1 to phase 2 clinical trials. Tremendous work by a lot of people, but it's really the passion and the energy of Dr. Jonathan Stamler, Dr. Mukesh Jain, and their teams.
And the definition of hope and cures as well. Dr. Megerian, I have to ask you, during this past year, how did you manage to successfully fund new areas of research relating to COVID-19 and at the same time still provide excellence in care at the hospitals?
You know, it's unbelievable, and I think it shows the amount of interest in our entire community in investing in what is a winner, and that is UH Cures and the Harrington Discovery Institute. I think we have to remember that UH now spreads from communities stretching all the way from the Pennsylvania border to halfway to Toledo, down to the middle of the state in Ashland. And there's a tremendous amount of folks, millions of folks, who have become, I think, very happy with the work that UH has done during this pandemic, and specifically how we have responded to our patients' needs with regards to detection, with regards to vaccine discovery, but more importantly, in terms of also drug discovery during this event. And what has happened, which is an incredible thing, out of the blue, we never expected it, there were more than $10 million in donations, from $1 to millions of dollars, specifically to UH during this COVID event, specifically to help UH Cures powered by HDI, which is, in my opinion, the best team in drug discovery. If you think about it, we've got people from across the world, across the Atlantic Ocean, who are gathered together. So I think this pandemic has put a spotlight on the incredible efforts of nearly 30,000 UH caregivers who are really heroes in my opinion, who are working on the front lines, behind the scenes, and 24/7, and really this is their story.
Years from now, if I get asked about this year, I think I will probably say it was one of the toughest years of my life, but one of the proudest moments of my life. You see the worst of the worst, and you can't really describe it unless you're living it. I think, I've met people who find out I'm a nurse and then they find out I work in COVID, and they want to hear everything. It's one hell of a story. Seeing all this stuff in the media and how sick these patients were in New York and how quickly their hospitals were filling up, are we prepared to handle this if it does come to us? So we kind of were anticipating, waiting for these patients to come, and they weren't coming at first. And then once March hit, it was probably right around St. Patrick's Day, I remember we started getting our first patients. The first patient that we got, the first COVID patient, when they came to the unit, the nurse who took the patient also has a family. And I could see in her face that she did not want to go in that room. And neither did I. None of us did. We didn't know, how contagious is this? Are we wearing the appropriate things? So, I gowned up and said, I will go in there with you. You don't have a choice, What kind of person would I be if I got up and said, you know what, I can't do this and leave? There are nurses that could have retired already, and they chose not to because this is a pandemic. This is what they were meant to do. And I'm blown away by their dedication. It's a daily struggle. How do you tell somebody, I'm sorry, you've been with your wife for 40 years and she has COVID and she's been here for a week. You haven't seen her for a week, and now she is probably going to die today and you are not allowed in here. So the nurses then became that lifeline between the family and the patient. And the nurse is holding the patient's hand while the family is saying goodbye on an iPad. It kind of takes all of that emotion, the nurse takes that in, and she's holding the patient's hand when the family would normally be there. So they take that home with them. Sorry. By far our toughest day, we had one of my nurses, her father was in our unit. He ultimately arrested in our unit. Every one of my nurses was in there. They tried for a very long time to revive him. They were unsuccessful, and they took all of that on their shoulders that day. So we kind of had to regroup at the end of that. But for it to be one of your own, I think that was like a defining moment for everybody in that unit. They talked about it, and then they went back onto the floor and took care of their patients. I guess for all of the deaths we have, there are patients that have gotten better, and we've had several patients return and say, thank you, you've saved my life. I can remember hearing your voice. I can remember you pushing me and saying, you're going to get better. Again, you're the lifeline, and they remember that. The families remember that. They come and they thank you, and they send cards, and that's what kind of brought us hope that for every couple of bad things that happen, we always have that one thing to remind us, okay, this is why we're doing this. It's a much needed moment for all of us. I feel like the team that we have right now is the only reason why we've gotten through this. We've cried together. The nurses have cried to me, I have cried to them. The vaccine definitely has given us hope. The dedication of my staff gives me hope. So have they earned that right of being called a superhero? I 100% think so. They are. Every day, they amaze me.
What we just saw is a powerful representation of what happens every day within the walls of University Hospital's health system, whether in downtown Cleveland or in the west side in Parma, again, or in Easton, Conneaut. Our caregivers are heroes, and the resolve to attend to the needs of UH patients is unparalleled. I would like to sincerely thank our keynote speakers, Sir John Bell and Dr. Dan Simon, for a fascinating look at the tremendous future of medicine here in Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, and now we learn globally. As well, our appreciation to Senior Health Correspondent Monica Robbins of WKYC-TV 3 for her expert moderation of this event. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your tremendous support and generosity that you've shown for UH. Thank you for your interest in the critical role of research and drug development in public health fueled by our community here in Cleveland. Our work, I cannot emphasize this enough, is the result of your dedication to the welfare of others. We are honored to work with you to search for cures, to provide hope, and to save lives. It is with sincere optimism that we look forward to speaking with you all again in the near future, both virtually and I believe soon in person, to share the incredible medical advancements forthcoming from University Hospitals. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Dr. Megerian. And of course, there is definitely light at the end of the tunnel. That's what this night is here to show you. And as we conclude our time together, I again want to thank Sir John Bell for joining us this evening and acknowledge the incredible leadership of Dr. Cliff Megerian and Dr. Dan Simon. I'd also like to give a very special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Key Private Bank Family Wealth, for their support of this program. And finally, on behalf of all of us, thanks so much to each and every one of you for your continued generosity and support of University Hospitals. As we keep moving forward to a world that has this pandemic under control, remember the power is in your hands. So when you can, please get vaccinated and continue to wear your mask, keep your distance, and of course, pandemic or not, wash your hands. Have a great night, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us.